So the wife's K-1 visa raises questions, obviously, about how easy it is for people to get into this country. But Senator Marco Rubio says that we should start looking at potential threats of radical Islam here at home as well. Well, here's what he said.
It's not about shutting them down. It's about surveilling them. It's about being able to have access to these facilities, whether it's a mosque or a restaurant where people are being radicalized, and being able to surveil them and identify individuals within them and learn about what's occurring. The markers are pretty clear. You go to a mosque, and if a mosque is handing out radicalized literature, if the preaching on Fridays after prayers is radicalized, that gives a pretty strong indicator that there are people attending that place.
A lot of questions here. Thomas Joscelyn is a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and he is senior editor of the very well-respected Long War Journal. Tom, good to have you back on the program. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Let's go to Marco Rubio's point here when he takes a look at what's going on, and how to track these people. And the question of surveillance of mosques. It was done in the New York, New Jersey area under Ray Kelly, and then it was ended under Mayor de Blasio. Is this something we need to be doing?
Well, you're always going to have some surveillance program, I think, in place. The thing to be careful about here is there's evidence that Said Farouk, the husband, actually checked out of his mosque some time ago.
But isn't that something in and of itself?
Maybe, but maybe not.
Because he was there every day.
It could be.
And then suddenly he doesn't show up anymore.
It could be, or it could be a loss of religiosity that leads him to check out. So we don't really know. The point is that, there's a lot of things that could tripwire the system to trigger surveillance. In this case, it's not really clear where there was a miss. There was clearly a miss, though.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's take a look and listen to this from James Comey yesterday. He talked a lot about the process and about his own frustrations with the process.
In May, when two terrorists attempted to kill a whole lot of people in Garland, Texas, before one of those terrorists left to try and commit mass murder, he exchanged 109 messages with an overseas terrorist. We have no idea what he said because those messages were encrypted.
Unbelievable.
That's stunning. I mean, that's absolutely stunning. I mean, the fact that we don't know now, after all this time, is really incredible.
Why would that be?
I don't know what the exact reason is. Obviously, somebody's blocking access to those texts, I would imagine, but I don't know why that is. The problem here is, if you look at the big picture, though, think about it from Director Comey's perspective. Think about it if you're in his shoes or in one of these guys' shoes in the U.S. government. The problem is the system's blinking red again. Right? We're in a pre-9/11 atmosphere. We have threats coming from all different directions. So these guys right now are trying to track down so many different threats and neutralize them that, of course, people like the couple in San Bernadino are going to get through. Because the problem is you can't neutralize them all anymore. And so right now we have to have a real conversation about how far we want to go to try and neutralize some of these threats and push these things forward. The problem in San Bernadino that I see is this couple may very well have been sort of the perfect self-made sleeper cell. Basically they were thinking about this for a long time. The husband was thinking about plots all the way back in 2012. There's evidence that maybe they were thinking about launching a terrorist attack in revenge for the death of Osama bin Laden. They have all sorts of ties that are still not explained, really, overseas. All this goes into a perfect package where basically there are a lot of red flags, a lot of warning signs, but there are easy ways to miss them. So,
I mean, you talk about 900 investigations going on in 50 states across this country, right? And then this couple pops up and you can tell. Nobody was on them, right? So you have to perhaps create a system where there is an enticement to speak up within the community, right? I mean, look at, how the mafia was dealt with. You have to have an enticement within the community to say, because it's always the same way, Tom. The initial reports were, normal guy, right, normal wife, exactly. Nobody knew a thing. She was a truly caring housewife, according to the attorney. But then no. It wasn't, right? Yeah. You got the guy next door who's buying the guns. People always know something when these situations happen, right?
We've got to have those incentives in place to let people speak up. What I would caution here is that there are people who do speak up. In Minnesota, for example, you just had your segment right before I came on with all these young men who are going out to fight for Shabab and now ISIS. In that community, this is incredibly divisive. Some families feel victimized here because they've lost their sons to jihadism, and there's a real sense of victimization there by the jihad because of the jihadists. That's something we need to harness.
But isn't that the perfect climate to say to Muslims in that community? I mean, Minneapolis, wonderful state, Twin Cities, fantastic place. They are being, basically brushed with this swap that they are probably the strongest hotbed in the country right now. So, how do we encourage people in that community to say, rise up against these people? And we will have your back when you do.
Well, I think we need to draw a distinction between jihadism, which is an ideology within the Islamic world, and the rest of Islam, the rest of the Islamic civilization. Remember, most of the victims of jihadists to this day, on a day-to-day basis, some we cover at the Long War Journal every day, are Muslims.
Absolutely.
They're not people that look like you and me. They're not
Right.
people here in New York, you know. They're actually people over in Syria or Iraq or somewhere else. And that's the key message in all of this, is that the jihadists are at war with most Muslims across the planet.
Yeah.
And that is a very powerful message.
Because
we have
they
to
believe
harness.
that those Muslims aren't Muslim enough.
That's right. And
for them.
And you know, in the case of ISIS, they demand the absolute loyalty of all Muslims across the planet, and that's something we can exploit.
Yeah, and we need to eliminate them in Raqqa, for starters, right? And end the caliphate.
Well,
and that's the hub.
That's the biggest problem here, is that basically you look at all this, what are we doing? We're playing defense, right? Yeah. And the hub of this is in Raqqa. That's where the planning takes place. But the hub of this is bigger than that. It's an idea, the idea of jihadism and the idea of the caliphate. You know, the ISIS is pushing this idea that they are now this sort of apocalyptic resurrection of the caliphate here on earth, right? And they're pushing this message across, you know, on a day-to-day basis in multiple languages, right? The best way to end that message, to discredit it and to roll all this back, is to end their caliphate.
Tom, thank you. Very
Thank
good
you.
to talk to you today. Good to have you here.
Thanks.